lonely ranch owner's life changed. When his daughters brought home a beautiful Apache woman, John Reynolds lived all alone on his big ranch, far away from the busy towns and noisy cities. The ranch was wide and stretched over many acres of land. It had green fields where cows grazed, a small barn, and a house that looked a little old but was full of memories. John had worked hard to take care of this ranch for many years, and it was the only place he truly called home. John wasn't always alone. Many years ago, his wife, Mary, lived there with him. Together, they raised their 2 daughters, Emily and Sarah. The girls had grown up running through the fields, helping feed the animals, and listening to their father's stories by the fire at night. The house was full of laughter and love in those days. But then, life changed. Mary became sick, and after a long time she passed away. It was the hardest time for John and his daughters. A ranch, which once felt warm and full of life, suddenly felt empty. Mary's favorite chair sat in the corner of the living room, untouched. The flowers she planted in the garden stopped blooming. After Mary's passing, John tried to keep everything the same. He worked from morning till evening, feeding the cattle, fixing fences, and maintaining the land. The ranch needed a lot of work, and John made sure it was never left unattended. But inside he felt a growing emptiness. Emily and Sarah were still young when their mother passed away. They stayed close to their father for a while, helping him with the chores and keeping him company. But as they grew older, they started to dream of a different life. They wanted to go to school in the city, make new friends, and explore opportunities their small town could never offer. John understood. He never stopped his daughters from chasing their dreams. He was proud of them for wanting more from life. So, one by one, Emily and Sarah left the ranch to live in the city. John stayed behind, tending to the land that had been in his family for generations. Days turned into months, and months turned into years. The ranch was still beautiful, with its rolling hills and quiet mornings. But John's life grew quieter too. Without his daughters around, the house was often empty, and the silence sometimes felt too loud. John missed the small things, the sound of footsteps on the wooden floor, the laughter at the dinner table, and the gentle voices of Emily and Sarah calling him inside from the fields. He missed sharing stories, watching old movies, and hearing about their lives in the city. But mostly, he missed having someone there to share the day with. At times, John felt lonely. He would sit on the porch in the evenings, looking at the sky as the sun set behind the hills. The sky would change colors from soft pink to deep orange, and then the stars would come out one by one. He remembered how Mary used to point out the constellations to the girls, telling them stories about each star. John's daughters called him often, but it was not the same as having them close. He would listen carefully to their voices over the phone, hearing about their jobs, friends, and city life. He was happy they were doing well, but a part of him wished they were still nearby. Even the animals on the ranch seemed to notice John's quiet mood. The horses didn't run around as much as before, and the cows gathered slowly when called. The land itself felt peaceful, but missing the energy that family brings. John's routine was simple, but full of small tasks. He woke up early, sometimes before the sun, to check on the cattle. He made sure they had enough food and water and looked after their health. He repaired fences that were broken by storms or time. He cleaned the barn and kept the ranch's equipment in good shape. Every night he would write letters to his daughters, sharing his thoughts and stories, hoping they would feel close even from far away. One morning after a long winter, John woke to the smell of fresh earth and blooming wildflowers. Spring had arrived, and with it came new life. The trees were turning green, birds sang in the branches, and the world seemed ready to start fresh again. But John still felt the same quiet sadness. The ranch was alive all around him, but inside he carried a heavy feeling he couldn't shake. He longed for something more, something he could not quite name. One afternoon, John decided to take a walk through the fields. The sun was warm, and a soft breeze touched his face. He walked slowly, thinking about the past and the future. Brain. He wondered if the ranch would always be just a place of work and memories, or if it could be a place where new happiness could grow. As he stood near the edge of the field looking out at the wide-open sky, John saw a hawk soaring high above. The bird's strong wings carried it effortlessly through the air. It reminded John that life goes on no matter how hard the journey is. That day, John made a quiet promise to himself. He would keep taking care of the ranch, but he would also try to open his heart again. He knew that life might surprise him, even after so many years of quiet. Days passed, and John continued his work. He fixed a broken gate, painted the fence, and mended a leaky roof. The ranch looked cared for, but John's heart was still waiting. Sometimes, when the wind whispered through the trees, John thought about how much he missed having his daughters around. He missed sharing his life with someone who understood the land and the quiet beauty of the ranch. And so, the ranch remained John's world, a place of hard work, memories, and silent hope. Though the loneliness was real, deep inside John believed that maybe, one day, something would change. For now, he was a lonely ranch owner, living a simple life, holding on to the past and waiting for a new chapter to begin. One bright spring morning, John was finishing his chores when he heard the sound of a car driving slowly down the long dirt road that led to the ranch. Desk. It was a rare sound on the property, where only the wind, birds, and animals usually filled the quiet air. John looked up from fixing a fence and wiped the sweat from his forehead. His heart skipped a little with surprise. His daughters, Emily and Sarah, were coming to visit. That in itself was a special moment, but this time they were not alone. Following behind them was a young woman with striking features and a calm presence. She had dark, shining eyes and long black hair that flowed freely in the breeze. Her clothes were simple but showed care and respect for nature. She walked with grace, carrying a small bag on her shoulder. John watched as his daughters smiled and talked quietly with the young woman. They seemed happy and relaxed. John felt a strange mix of emotions: curiosity, hope, and a little nervousness. Emily and Sarah approached him, their faces glowing with excitement. "Dad, we want you to meet someone very special," Emily said softly. "This is Ayanna." Ayanna smiled politely and said, "It's very nice to meet you, Mr. Reynolds." John nodded, his eyes studying the young woman carefully. He could tell she was respectful and kind, but also strong and confident. "Welcome to the ranch, Ayanna," John said in his slow, calm voice. "You're always welcome here." Emily and Sarah explained that Ayanna was visiting their city as part of a cultural exchange program. She was from an Apache community far away, and during her stay, she and the girls had become close friends. They thought it would be a wonderful idea for Ayanna to experience life on the ranch for a while. They believed her presence could bring something new and positive to their father's life. John wasn't sure what to think at first. He was used to running the ranch alone, and having a new person there felt strange. But seeing the happiness in his daughter's eyes and the calm kindness in Ayanna's face, he decided to say yes. That evening, the house felt different. The air was filled with quiet energy as Ayanna settled in. She brought small gifts from her homeland: hand-woven cloth, beautiful beads, and a book of stories from her people. John listened as she told him about her life, her family, and the traditions that had been passed down for generations. Breaths. Ayanna spoke softly but with pride. She talked about the importance of the land, the animals, and the connection her people had with nature. John felt a deep respect growing inside him. Though their lives were very different, he could see the same love for the earth in her words that he felt for his ranch. Over the next few days, Ayanna helped with chores around the ranch. She fed the animals carefully and learned how to ride a horse, though she was already very skilled. Her presence brought laughter back into the house, and even John found himself smiling more often. Emily and Sarah enjoyed watching their father open up. They remembered how hard it had been after their mother passed away and how lonely the ranch had become. Now, with Ayana around, the house felt alive again. One morning, John found Ayana outside by the barn, teaching Sarah how to weave a simple basket using reeds from the river. The basket was rough at first, but Sarah's hands grew steady under Ayana's patient guidance. John joined them quietly, watching the two with a gentle smile. "You're a good teacher, Ayana," he said. Ayana looked up and smiled warmly. "Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. I am happy to share. Our people have made these baskets for many years. They remind us of patience and care." Basic. John nodded. He thought about how many things he could learn from this woman who had come so far to visit his quiet ranch. Maybe this was the change he had been waiting for. As the days went by, John and Ayana spent more time talking. Friends. She showed him how to identify different plants that grew wild on the ranch, some that could be used for medicine, others for food. John was amazed to learn about herbs and flowers he had never noticed before. In the evenings, they sat by the fire outside, sharing stories. Ayana told tales of Apache warriors and their respect for the earth. John shared memories of his youth and how the ranch had been built by his ancestors. The firelight danced on their faces, and a peaceful feeling settled between them. Emily and Sarah sometimes joined them, bringing hot tea or fresh bread. The house felt full of warmth, something that had been missing for a long time. One afternoon a storm rolled in, and heavy rain began to fall. The wind howled through the trees, and thunder rumbled in the distance. John worried about the cattle, so he and Ayana went out to check on them together. They worked side by side, guiding the animals to safer parts of the field and securing the barn doors. John noticed how calm and brave Ayana was, even as the storm grew stronger. Her strength gave him confidence. After the storm passed, the sun came out again, and a beautiful rainbow stretched across the sky. John looked at Ayana and felt something shift inside him. This woman, from a different world, had brought light back to his life. One evening, as they all sat down to dinner, Emily and Sarah told John how happy they were to see him smiling again. "We wanted to bring someone special here," Sarah said. "Someone who could help us all heal." John reached out and took Ayana's hand across the table. "Thank you for coming," he said simply. Ayana squeezed his hand gently and replied, "I am glad to be here." In the weeks that followed, the ranch became a place of learning and sharing. John showed Ayana how to work the land, while she taught him about her culture and traditions. The daughters saw their father grow stronger, more open, and less lonely. The ranch was no longer just a place of work. It had become a home filled with hope and new beginnings. John realized that sometimes life's surprises come in the form of new friendships, and sometimes those friendships change everything. Though John still missed his wife Mary, he understood that life moves forward. With his daughters by his side and Ayana's gentle presence in the house, he felt ready to face whatever the future might bring. And so the lonely ranch owner's world began to change, all because his daughters brought home a beautiful Apache woman who carried with her stories, kindness, and the promise of something new. Days turned into weeks, and life on the ranch began to feel different, brighter, and fuller. John Reynolds, the lonely ranch owner, found himself waking up each morning with something new to look forward to. The presence of Ayana, the beautiful Apache woman his daughters had brought home, was slowly changing his world in ways he never expected. At first, John kept to himself, as he always did. He was a man of few words, shaped by years of solitude and hard work. He was careful not to show too much emotion or vulnerability. But Ayana's quiet strength and gentle nature began to draw him out of his shell. She had a way of moving through the ranch, calm and steady, as if she belonged to the land. One morning John watched her walk along the edge of the pasture, her eyes soft but full of life. She paused to touch the leaves of a tree, whispering a word John didn't understand, but he sensed it was a blessing. John was curious about her, about the life she came from. One afternoon, while they were working together fixing a broken fence, he asked, "Ayana, what was it like growing up in your home?" Ayana looked thoughtful for a moment. It was quiet, like here, but different. "My people live close to the land, much like you do. We learn from the earth, the wind, and the animals. We have stories and songs that teach us how to live with respect and courage." John nodded slowly. "That sounds peaceful." "It is," she said softly, "but also not always easy. There is strength in our people, and sometimes we face challenges from outside. But we hold on to our traditions and our family." John listened carefully. He thought about his own family, about the love and loss that had shaped him. He realized that though their worlds were different, they shared many things: hope, strength, and a deep connection to their homes. As the days passed, Ayana taught John more about her culture. She showed him how to make simple medicines from plants, how to read the signs of the weather, and how to honor the earth with small acts of gratitude. John was amazed at how much he could learn, even after all his years on the ranch. One evening after a long day of work, John and Ayana sat outside under the stars. The night was cool and clear. Ayana pointed to the sky and began to tell him about the constellations her people knew. She told stories of heroes, animals, and the lessons behind each star. John was quiet but deeply moved. It had been a long time since he felt this close to someone, this connected to something larger than himself. The stars reminded him of his wife Mary, who used to tell him stories about the night sky. He felt her presence there, in the warmth of the firelight and in the gentle voice beside him. Ayana noticed the change in John, round in desk. She saw how his face softened, how his eyes sparkled with new light. It was as if the loneliness that had once weighed so heavily on him was slowly lifting. The daughters, Emily and Sarah, were happy to see their father opening up. They joined in on the evenings outside, listening to Ayana's stories and sharing their own dreams. The ranch, once quiet and empty, was now filled with laughter and conversation. One day John invited Ayana to ride with him across the fields. They rode side by side on horseback, the wind in their faces and the sun shining above. John pointed out places where he had built fences or planted trees, sharing the history of the land. Ayana smiled, taking it all in. "This place is special," she said. "I can feel the spirit of your family here. It's all I have left sometimes," he admitted. "You're not alone anymore," Ayana said softly. Her words stayed with him long after the ride. John realized that her presence was more than just company. It was hope. It was a chance to heal and to find happiness again. The weeks continued to pass, and the bond between John and Ayana grew stronger. They worked side by side, shared stories, and learned from each other. John found himself looking forward to their talks, to the quiet moments of understanding between them. One afternoon, a visitor came to the ranch, a neighbor who had known John for many years. He stopped by to check on the cattle and was surprised to see Ayana there. "She's with your daughters, isn't she?" the neighbor asked, smiling warmly. John nodded. "Yes." "She's been helping around the ranch." The neighbor looked at Ayanna and then back at John. It's good to see you smiling again, John. You've been through a lot, but it looks like things are getting better. Maybe it was true. Maybe the loneliness was fading, replaced by something new. That evening, John sat with Ayanna by the fire and shared a story from his youth. He told her about his first time working on the ranch, about the lessons his father had taught him, and the dreams he had once held. Ayanna listened quietly, her eyes full of kindness. When he finished, she took his hand and said, "You are strong, John. Your heart is ready for new beginnings." John smiled, feeling a peace he hadn't known in years. Ayanna saw not just a visitor, but someone who understood him, who shared his love for the land and respect for life. The ranch was no longer a place of loneliness. It was a place where two worlds met, where old wounds began to heal, and where hope blossomed. John knew the road ahead would not always be easy. But with Ayanna by his side and his daughters close, he felt ready to face whatever came next. For the first time in a long time, John Reynolds was not alone. A time on the ranch seemed to slow down and become richer with meaning. The quiet days that John Reynolds once faced alone were now filled with new sounds, laughter, conversation, and the gentle rhythms of life shared. The bond between John and Ayanna was growing stronger every day, and the whole family felt it. At first, John was cautious with his feelings. He had spent so many years protecting his heart after losing Mary, his wife. He wasn't sure if he could let someone new in. But Ayanna's calm presence, her kindness, and her respect for the land slowly broke down the walls he had built around himself. One morning John woke up early and found Ayanna already outside, preparing breakfast by the small fire near the porch. The smell of freshly brewed coffee and warm bread filled the air. She smiled when she saw him, and invited him to join. As they ate, John noticed how natural it felt to be with her. They talked about simple things, how the animals were doing, the weather, and the work that needed to be done on the ranch. There was no rush, no pressure, just the peaceful comfort of sharing a quiet morning. After breakfast, John and Ayanna went to check on the cattle. They worked together easily, moving through the fields with practiced steps. John admired Ayanna's strength and her gentle way of handling the animals. It was clear she loved the land and the life it supported. As they finished, John stopped and looked at her. "Ayanna," he said quietly, "I want you to know how much you've changed this place, and me." "I don't think I realized how lonely I was until you came."
Ayanna met his eyes with a soft smile.
Sometimes we all need someone to remind us of the good that still exists. John felt a warmth spread through his chest. He hadn't expected to feel this way again, but he was grateful. That afternoon, Emily and Sarah came to the ranch for a visit. They laughed and talked as they helped Ayanna gather herbs and flowers from the garden. The house was full of life, and John was happy to see his daughters enjoying the company of their new friend. Emily noticed something different in her father's eyes. "Dad," she said gently, "we're so glad you're happy. You deserve it." John nodded, feeling a lump in his throat. "Thank you, Emily. I do feel different, like there's hope again." Sarah added, "We're glad you found someone who cares for you." The days turned into weeks, and John and Ayanna's relationship deepened. They began to share more about their lives, their dreams, and their fears. Ayanna told John about the struggles her people faced and the strength they drew from their culture, her family, and the hardships he had overcome. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, John and Ayanna sat on the porch, watching the sky turn shades of pink and orange. The quiet between them was comfortable, filled with a shared understanding. Ayana reached out and took John's hand in hers. "You are not alone anymore," she said softly. "We can build a future together." John looked at her, his eyes full of emotion. "I never thought I'd feel this way again, but with you, I believe it's possible." Their hands stayed joined as the stars began to appear overhead. The night was peaceful, and for the first time in many years, John felt a sense of belonging. The family celebrated small moments together. They shared meals, helped with the ranch work, and took time to enjoy the simple pleasures of life. Holidays were filled with a blend of traditions, some from John's family, others from Ayana's Apache heritage. Ayana introduced the family to songs and dances from her people. She taught the daughters about respect for nature and the importance of community. John watched with pride as his daughters embraced this new culture, seeing how it brought them closer together. One day a neighbor invited John and Ayana to a local gathering. It was a chance to meet others from nearby ranches and farms. John was hesitant at first, unsure how Ayana would be welcomed. But the neighbors greeted her warmly, curious and respectful. They asked questions about her traditions and listened as she shared stories of her people. John saw the respect in their eyes and felt grateful for the acceptance.
That evening, as they returned home, John said, "I'm glad you came with us today."
"It means a lot to see you welcomed like this," Ayana smiled. "Community is important. It helps us grow and heal." John realized how true her words were. The ranch was no longer an isolated place. It was part of a wider world, full of connections and possibilities. With Ayana by his side, John felt ready to face the future. The loneliness that had once defined his life was replaced by love, friendship, and hope. He looked forward to the days ahead, knowing that whatever challenges came, he would not face them alone. The lonely ranch owner had found a new family, and with it, a new beginning. The seasons changed, and with them came new beginnings on the ranch. John Reynolds felt a peace inside him that he had not known for a long time. Life, which once seemed quiet and lonely, now felt full of promise. The days were busy with work, laughter, and shared moments that made the ranch feel truly like home again. Ayana had become more than just a guest or a friend. She had become a part of the family. She was there in the mornings when John woke to the soft light of dawn, and in the evenings when the stars filled the sky with their gentle glow. Her presence was like the steady heartbeat of the ranch, strong and comforting. John often thought about how much his life had changed since that spring day when his daughters brought Ayana home. At first he was unsure. He had not expected to open his heart again after all the years of loneliness. But now, he could not imagine his life without her. The ranch had also changed. It was no longer just a place of work and memories, but a place of new stories and hope. The fields seemed greener, the animals more lively, and the house filled with warmth. John and Ayana worked side by side every day, tending to the land and caring for the animals. Their teamwork made the ranch stronger, and their friendship deeper. One afternoon, John and Ayana sat on the porch, watching the sun slowly set behind the hills. The sky was painted with beautiful colors, soft pinks, oranges, and purples blending together. They spoke quietly about their plans for the future. "I never thought I would be this happy again," John said, his voice full of gratitude. Ayana smiled and took his hand. "Sometimes life surprises us when we least expect it." John nodded, feeling a warmth spread through his heart. He knew that no matter what happened, they would face it together. The daughters, Emily and Sarah, were happy to see their father smiling and full of life again. They had watched him go through difficult times, and now they felt relief and joy knowing he had found love and friendship once more. They helped around the ranch whenever they could, and the family grew closer with each passing day. One weekend, they all gathered around a large table outside for a special meal, Apache culture, and John and his daughters shared their favorite family recipes. The meal was filled with stories, laughter, and the feeling of belonging. John looked around the table and felt a deep sense of happiness. This was what he had been waiting for, a family that blended old and new, different traditions, and a shared love for life. As the night grew darker, they sat by the fire telling stories and making plans for the ranch's future. John spoke of expanding the land, planting more trees, and maybe even opening a small farm stand to sell their fresh produce. Ayanna dreamed of teaching others about her culture and the importance of living in harmony with nature. Together they imagined a future where their lives and stories would continue to grow, connected by love and respect. John often thought about his wife Mary, and he knew she would have been happy to see the life that had blossomed on the ranch. Though she was gone, her memory lived on in the land, the house, and the family that was healing and growing. One day, John and Ayanna took a long walk through the fields, hand in hand. The sun was warm, and the breeze carried the scent of wildflowers. They stopped by a small tree that John had planted years ago in memory of Mary. John touched the bark gently and said, "This ranch has been my whole life." It holds so many memories, some sad, some beautiful. But now, it's also a place of new beginnings. Ayanna smiled and leaned her head on his shoulder. "And it will continue to grow, with all the love you put into it." John felt tears in his eyes, but they were tears of joy. He had found a new family, a new home, and a new chapter in his life. The loneliness that had once filled his days was gone, replaced by hope, love, and the promise of many more happy moments. The ranch was alive again, with the sound of laughter, the warmth of friendship, and the steady beat of a heart that had learned to love once more. John Reynolds, the lonely ranch owner, had found his home and family in the most unexpected way. A beautiful Apache woman, his daughters, and the land they all cared for deeply. And together they looked forward to a future filled with love, connection, and endless possibilities.